This is a concert that the Togogos actually had planned for 2020. So it was going to be our very first public concert event. We've done many other kinds of really exciting events, but this was our first musical event. And of course, pandemic hit and we had to put things on hold. So now we're in a position to be able to offer a really exciting and kind of innovative program for us to support the work of the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign. The band is part of the New Horizons Toronto band, that's what we're called. And this is an international organization that is geared for adults who want to either learn to play an instrument or come back to an instrument that they might have played before. We've got over 40 people in our wind ensemble that will be performing on Sunday, June the 4th. And I don't know what the average age is actually, but I would say somewhere north of 70. So, you know, there's nothing you can't do when you're of a certain age, that's for sure. It's going to be a really interesting program. The wind ensemble is the most experienced level of players that we have in the organization. And we've been working really hard and looking forward to entertaining the audience on Sunday. But the program is quite varied in terms of the pieces that we're going to be playing. It's a mix of sort of rocky type stuff and popular music and traditional concert band music. And some of the churchgoers may recognize Baba Yetu, which is one of the pieces we're going to be playing. It's the Lord's Prayer in Swahili. Now, none of the band members will be singing, but we'll all be playing it. And it's quite a wonderful piece. I know that the Bloor Street Choir and now our integrated choir has sung that. So I'm sure some of the members of the audience will recognize it. There is a march, I have to tell people, but there's only one. So we're doing John Philip Sousa proud, and then we'll let him go. But we've got a very nice program, and I think it's going to appeal to a lot of people for different reasons. Actually, I'm playing the French horn, and my husband, Bill Mowat, is on tuba. And he's featured in a little Dixieland component of one of the pieces we're doing. And the band leader, Donna Dupuy, wanted everybody to stand up. And I'm thinking, he's got a tuba. How is he going to do that? But, so we'll see what happens on Sunday. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is that despite the fact that most of the money goes to on the ground projects, I mean, there's virtually little staff. There is I would say a handful who have been working with various projects in Africa, and they become really experienced. And whenever they are brought to Canada and you hear them speak, you just marvel at what they do. But the underlying thing that comes across is the need is still there. I mean, HIV/AIDS has not disappeared. And unfortunately, it seems to impact women and girls most particularly. And so that is really still, foremost as a need that the Grandmothers Campaign continues to support.
Mm-hmm. I would just add too that the whole orientation of these financial support for the projects in sub-Saharan Africa are really oriented to a social justice, community development approach. It's all grassroots. The leadership comes from grandmothers in Africa, so it's not like there are foundation staff who are leading things and providing direction and making decisions. That's not how the Stephen Lewis Foundation works. They're all about empowering people in their own communities to take on the responsibility with a little bit of support, and if there's any training needed, then they'll get it. And that's very appealing, I think, from a social justice point of view. You want to, let people do their own fishing, as that expression says. You don't fish for them, you let them do their own fishing. And that's exactly how they're approaching the development and support for these local communities. It's quite inspiring. It really is quite amazing. You can certainly get tickets on Eventbrite. You just go to Eventbrite and look up New Horizons Band or look up Togogos, and I'm sure it would be there. At this point, though, it's probably easier if you buy tickets at the door. And we will have Togogos in the lobby of the church, the narthex, and they'll be happy to give you a ticket and give you a program.
It'll be nearing 20 years since the Togogos got going, and over all of those years have raised a good deal of money. But also, I think the passion for supporting the African grandmothers continues. And that sets it apart from some other groups, in my estimation, because you can actually do something about the situation of those grandmothers in sub-Saharan Africa who are having to raise their orphaned grandchildren. Some of them lost all of their own children to HIV/AIDS, and then have been raising their grandchildren and other kids over all these years. And even more amazingly, they've become so resilient themselves, these grandmothers, not only in terms of what they've learned, but how politically active they've become for their own human rights. And that, I think, has been very inspiring for Canadian grandmothers to see. And there's a lot of solidarity between those two groups, the Canadian grandmothers and the African grandmothers. It's quite exciting.
This is one of the things that the band New Horizons organization has in common with the work of the Stephen Lewis Foundation and the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign is certainly empowering older people to really take on and just demonstrate capacity. And certainly with the grandmothers in Africa who are now, of course, dealing with COVID and the impacts of that as well. Reaching out and developing skills in terms of their small business skills and leadership skills, and branching out into supporting education for girls and women and violence against girls and women as well. And it's the older women who are shouldering this as part of the work of the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign.
Just to pick up on your comment there, Mary Louise, one of the things I remember Stephen Lewis mentioning, and this is quite a few years ago, was that the future of Africa is on the shoulders of the grandmothers. That's a kind of visual statement as well. And fortunately, we're going to be able to learn a little bit more about what the Stephen Lewis Foundation is presently doing, what their priorities are, because the current executive director, Meg French, is going to come to speak on June the 4th. And it's going to be wonderful for all of us to see her in person, because unfortunately for her, she started as executive director in 2020, again, just at the start of the pandemic. So she hasn't had that much opportunity to get out and meet various grandmothers groups and the wider public. So we're very fortunate she's going to be there with us on Sunday. I've been involved, I guess, longer than Mary Louise. I wasn't one of the very original ones, but shortly after it started, we had a very inspirational, I would say, and charismatic person in Ruth Mechanicus, who was a member of Bloor Street United. And she had gone to the original grandmother's gathering in 2006. And to say she got fired up was probably an understatement. And so she really was the one who got things moving at Bloor Street. But we've always had members from beyond the congregation as well.
Yeah, I have to confess, I sort of waited until I actually became a grandmother to join. But now we talk about grandmothers and grandothers, because we get a lot of support from folks who, of course, are not grandmothers, and they just want to work to address these issues and do what they can to support the Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign.
fortunate we can do so at St. Matthew's, because everyone tells us the acoustics are so good there that it should be really a great venue for the band.
Especially after 3 years of not being able to do anything in person. That's kind of what's exciting about it.
It
And
sure
certainly
is.
the band is feeling that way too. We've been operating for the last, well, through the pandemic, as everyone has, through Zoom. So all of our concerts have actually been on Zoom. And so that's quite exciting for the band to play in front of a real live audience and have that exciting feedback that you always get from an in-person event.